Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Rudy is the man.
Testing 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Vito is the man.
Here,
A raise.
this is the county, so it's like you guys, you know what I'm saying? If it ever gets approved.
Turn the temperatures down. Okay. Normally keep my 70 west.
Yeah.
at that, and they'll see this light on here.
And so once everybody sits,
Yeah.
maybe you guys can just run by.
See the light? Yeah. When you see it red, it's hot.
Right over here. Yeah.
Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah.
This is for them. The red light will come on up here. It's this button right back here.
Right.
Or you'll turn on the button in the back to begin speaking into the microphone. Turn on the microphone.
I have to read this in 5 minutes. I'm with, say, Vincent DePaul Cares.
And you'll see it turn red right up there when it's on. Yeah.
Once it's on, you're good to go. It's better than having to hold it, right?
Right, exactly.
And when you're done talking, just turn it right back off.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Press it, you'll see the light turns red.
Okay.
And that way you don't have to hold it. Then when you're done talking, you can press it again.
Otherwise, I think it'll mute the way it's set.
Good morning. Call this hearing to order. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for the House Veterans Affairs Committee Economic Opportunities Subcommittee. I'm Mike Levin from Southern California, 49th District. Honored to be with you, honored to chair the Economic Opportunities Subcommittee. Very excited to be here in Newport Richey with my good friend, the ranking member, Gus Bilirakis, representing the 12th District here in Florida. Also happy to have our friend Ross Spano from the 15th District here in Florida. Really a pleasure to get to work with my friend, the ranking member, on veterans issues. It's, I think, the one area in Congress where we are working together across party lines. And for everybody, I hope, if nothing else, you walk away today knowing that we're trying to get things done for our veterans, trying to give back to those who are serving and those who've given so much for our freedom and our security. Our subcommittee addresses many of the key challenges facing veterans, such as housing and homelessness, transition assistance, education, and job training programs. Today, our hearing is titled Combating Veteran Homelessness in the Tampa Bay Area, and it's going to examine how federal, state, local, and non-governmental resources are working to reduce veteran homelessness. And I can tell you we just had a similar hearing in my neck of the woods in San Diego, California, and I can already tell from my discussions this morning there are a lot of issues that are very, very similar that we'll be discussing today. I thank the ranking member for joining me in California a couple weeks ago to see the issues that we face there, and I look forward to learning more about the issues here. I can already tell things like, trying to find enough affordable and available housing for our veteran community is really critical. The cost of housing might be a little different in California. The tax system might be a little bit different in California, but the issues are the same. I notice your gas prices are pretty good. I noticed that on the way here. I hope everybody knows that there's more going on in Congress than you see on the cable news. And the work we do on Veterans Affairs doesn't always get covered, but it's an area where we're already making progress. I think we've gotten something like 20 bills out of our subcommittee, Gus, something like that. And a lot of them are going to be signed into law. A number of them have already been signed into law by the President. And we're very, very grateful. I think everybody on the committee is very grateful for the opportunity to serve. One of the things that we learned in our hearing last month was that if we can prevent veterans from falling into homelessness in the first place, as opposed to having to deal with the issues surrounding homelessness, the cost is maybe 1/10 of that for prevention as it is for actually dealing with the acute problem. So that's something I want to keep in mind. We also learned about the difficulty of accurately counting homeless veterans so we can focus our efforts and resources where they're needed. There's some dispute over how that count works. We heard ideas about how to better educate service members about federal resources that will help them avoid housing insecurity, specifically things like the HUD BASH program. A lot of people use SSVF as well. I'm really excited. I think I can say this, right, that this week we're going to be voting to reauthorize $380 million for SSVF, so I'm pretty excited about that. We need to do more. We need to expand HUD BASH so that it provides assistance to more veterans. We need to improve data collection, and we need to better share the data between the federal government and local leaders. And we need to increase federal assistance to homeless veterans with children in particular. We heard from a woman recently at one of our hearings in D.C. That some mothers, veteran moms, single moms, are worried that if they come forward and talk about the services that they need, that they may be at risk of losing their children. We have to make sure that we eliminate that fear however possible. We're only effective as members of Congress when we learn from the experts, and that's why I'm really grateful that you're all here. I look forward to learning from you and hopefully to continue the collaboration in the months and years ahead as we try to craft good public policy based on the actual needs on the ground of the veterans in your community, veterans in my community, and throughout the country. And we've got a couple of other great members. I do need to say one technical thing. The lawyers, they make me say technical things. So I ask for unanimous consent that any members of Congress present or that may appear later because we've invited a couple others, may be seated at the dais for the purpose of participating in this congressional hearing. So Ross, there you go. Good stuff. So with that, I'd like to introduce my dear friend, the ranking member of the House Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, Florida's very own Gus Bilirakis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, friends. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, welcome to California without the taxes. That's Florida. It's a great place after the hearing, if you'd like to come up to us. And I do have some prepared remarks, so I probably should stick with them, and then we can hear from all these experts how to solve this issue, because we do such a great job here in Pasco County, but the entire 12th Congressional District. However, we can do better. So we want to know what works and what doesn't work. And we need to know how much, these programs, how well they're doing, so that we can continue the funding. Or if they're not doing well, let's put the funding elsewhere. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you all for joining us here for this field hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. And who says Republicans and Democrats don't get along? We work together in a bipartisan fashion for our true American heroes. And I want to thank Chairman Levin. He's been outstanding. And I'm telling you, they've been more than fair to me, being in the minority with regard to veterans issues and getting veterans issues done. So we're kind of a model for the rest of Congress. And hopefully they're listening and they're hearing us today, because these are not partisan issues. They're American issues. My name is Gus Bilirakis, and it is my pleasure not only to serve as a congressman from the 12th Congressional District of Florida, of course we're here today in Pasco County, but also to serve as the ranking member, the lead Republican on the subcommittee. I want to thank the Pasco County government, again, the Government Center, for providing the facilities to host this field hearing, especially Vito Tambasco. Where is Vito? He's probably working. Vito, thank you so very much for what you've done. Really, I mean, I know you put a lot of hours into making this happen, so we appreciate it very much. And then also my colleague, as I said, Chairman Levin, for being here and holding this field hearing. I had to get permission from the chairman to hold this hearing. I did go to California, and we learned quite a bit. And I know it's not a difficult thing to come to Florida, Mr. Chairman, but I really appreciate you being here. And then Sheriff Naco. I'm not sure if Sheriff Naco's here yet. Oh, there he is. Hey, Sheriff. How are you? Thank you so very much for what you do. Thanks for keeping us safe, Sheriff. We appreciate it so much. Let's see, Dan Anderson from the Homeless Coalition. Okay. I want to thank all of these people. Stephen Carey, who is representing Congressman Chris today. And as a matter of fact, I did call Congressman Chris a couple times, and he probably has a conflict, but don't be surprised if he doesn't show up in the middle of the hearing, which is fine. Let's see, Catherine Starkey, Pasco County Commissioner, she's coming on her way, and then Jack Mariano. I don't want to leave anyone out here, and then of course Judge Sean Crane. Sean does a wonderful job for our veterans, heading up the Veterans Court in this circuit. So we appreciate you so very much. And all of you are just, you're veterans advocates. You're selfless as far as I'm concerned. You know your priority is with our heroes, and that's where my priority is as well. It's great to work with a thoughtful legislator, again, like Chairman Levin, on our continued goal to provide economic opportunities for veterans. I thank him for traveling to our community and hearing firsthand from Floridians on the issues that our veterans face. if we could not, let's just pause for a second, please, or more than a second, to allow all the veterans to recognize themselves. If you're a veteran, please raise your hand, or if you'd like to stand, you're capable of standing, that's fine too. Please, we would need to honor you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service, again, to our country. It's an honor to represent you in the United States Congress. Before we begin, I want to point out members of my staff standing in the back. And let's see, we have a few. Rob Fleege. Where's Rob? Raise your hand, Rob. Rob is our Veterans Outreach staffer. He does an outstanding job, and obviously he served in the Army as well. He was in the first invasion of Iraq. Jill Peters is here as well. Raise your hand, Jill. And she'll help you with any casework you might have. Our Chief of Staff might be running late, Elizabeth Hitos, but she'll be here. And everyone knows Summer Robertson, who is our District Director and our Deputy Chief of Staff. Raise your hand, Summer. Thank you so very much. If any of you, again, if you have any issues concerning veterans or anything to do with the federal government, please don't hesitate to approach my staff. We'll be happy to help you out in any way we can. Yeah, please feel free to stop and ask any questions you might have. They work hard every day, again, for our veterans in the 12th Congressional District to assist with the VA and the Department of Defense-related issues. Today, we're here to examine and highlight programs and benefits that help combat veteran homelessness. There's been a significant amount of progress made nationwide in reducing homelessness among veterans, but we still have much more work to do. Several municipalities have even eliminated veteran homelessness altogether by obtaining functional zero, and we'll define that during the hearing. While this is good news, as funding for homeless veteran programs at the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Labor have reached record levels, we must ensure that we have a true picture of how this money is being spent. Last month, we held a similar field hearing, as I said, on veteran homelessness in Chairman Levin's district near San Diego, California. One of the biggest issues facing homeless programs in California is the lack of affordable housing and the difficulties of building more of it. Sound familiar? I'm interested in finding out from our witnesses today how high housing costs create major issues for homeless programs in the Tampa Bay area and in Florida as a whole. While I believe it is important to provide veterans with housing through the VA's HUD-VASH housing voucher program, it is even more critical for the long-term success of these veterans that they also receive comprehensive wraparound services that help them find meaningful employment. Do you agree? It's so important. Without helping veterans find meaningful employment, we are only providing them temporary housing and not setting them up for positive long-term success. I'm grateful to our witnesses for giving us an opportunity to hear directly from those on the ground in this fight against veteran homelessness about what they believe works, doesn't work, and how we in Congress can help combat this problem. While we have had success in combating veteran homelessness in our community, I know we all share the common goal to ensure those who have worn the cloth of our country are never homeless. Once again, I thank the chairman for holding this field hearing in the 12th Congressional District. And before I yield back, I want to thank Representative Spano, our neighbor here in Hillsborough County, for being here today and caring for our heroes. So with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. And just to say something that hopefully you all realize, which is that Ranking Member Bilirakis is really one of the leaders in the United States House of Representatives when it comes to advocating for our veterans. So you've got a true national leader on this issue, and I think everybody knows that, right? If you don't, you have a great member of Congress. So we love our friend Gus Bilirakis. With that, I'd like to introduce another friend from Florida's 15th District. That's Ross Spano for his opening statement. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's right.
How's that? Maybe? No? How's that? All right. Okay. Well, thank you for having me, Chair Levin, Ranking Member Bilirakis. It's an honor to be with you. When I talked to the Ranking Member on the floor last week, he made sure to remind me that he had invited me to be at this event this morning. And as you probably are aware, you guys certainly know this, we get so many invitations from all over the place. But I immediately contacted my staff and said, we're going to move whatever we need to move around so that we can at least be there for the beginning of the hearing and show our support for this effort, because it is an important one. I do have the honor of representing Florida's 15th Congressional District, and that is most of eastern Hillsborough County and parts of Polk County and Lake County over near Orlando, and it is an honor to serve. Very quickly, just wanted to say, give a shout out to my former colleague in the Florida House, Danny Burgess, who now serves as Director of Florida's Department of Veterans Affairs. It's good to see you, brother. Thank you for being here and offering your testimony this morning. And I want to personally thank each and every one of the veterans that are here this morning. Thank you for what you do and have done. And I am grateful. My family is grateful to you for your service and your sacrifice. Thank you. I'm pleased to be co-sponsor of a number of veterans support bills, one of which kind of falls right within kind of the wheelhouse of this hearing this morning, and that's H.R. 95. It's the Homeless Veterans Families Act. You may or may not know about that bill, but it goes a long way toward ensuring that the children of veterans have access to shelters and housing. And I wanted to kind of give you an idea. So currently, if you're a non-veteran homeless in the United States, federal funds will pay for each head in bed through a per diem to the service agency housing a family. However, if you're a veteran homeless family, the VA's GPD program will only pay for the cost of occupancy for the veteran, but not for the dependent family member. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. So what this has resulted in, unfortunately, is many GPD providers not accepting homeless veterans with dependent children. So that needs to change. We've all heard the quote that freedom isn't free. That's true in the sense that there's a great cost to defend freedom emotionally in the sacrifices of health and life. But also important is the understanding that we must devote our financial resources as a nation to support the men and women when they come home to us. And G.K. Chesterton once said that courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live taking the form of a readiness to die. And so publicly, nationally, we thank and we honor the courage of our veterans. And we demonstrate that gratitude by our actions when you return home. And so I believe I speak for the entire Congress. I know I speak for the committee when I say that we now stand ready to do whatever it takes to support you. And so thank you again. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for being here, Representative Spano. Well, we have a great panel, and we're going to have, I think, plenty of time to dig into the issues with you, just as we did, Mr. Ranking Member, back in California. My hope is that we're informed. The work that we do in Washington is informed by what you tell us today. I like to tell our local constituents, you know, my output as a legislator is only good as the input, so we need all the input we can get. And we've got a great panel, so I'd like to introduce everybody. First is Mr. Joe Battle, Director of the James A. Haley Veterans Hospital. Thanks for being here, sir. Mr. Danny Burgess, Executive Director of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. Thank you so much for being here and your service in Florida. Mr. David Lambert, Chairman of the Pasco County Housing Authority. Thanks for coming. Mr. Michael Raposa, Chief Executive Officer of St. Vincent de Paul Cares. Thanks for being here. Mr. Brian Anderson, Founder and CEO of Veterans Alternative. Thank you so much. And Ms. Mary White, a formerly homeless veteran who served the United States Army. We're deeply grateful for you being here today to share your story with us. So as you know, you're going to have 5 minutes for an opening statement. Then we'll have time for questions. I think we'll have plenty of time for questions. Hopefully we'll have time for 2 rounds of questions. And your full statements, to the extent you submitted written statements, will be added to the record. And of course, we'll welcome your comments and feedback. You know, our dialogue doesn't just end here today. We need your active participation in all the work that we're doing in service of our veterans in the months and years ahead. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Mr. Battle. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bilirakis, and Representative Spano. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today on the topic of veteran homelessness. Each area of the country brings unique challenges faced by veterans at risk of experiencing homelessness. For those of you who aren't familiar with the James A. Haley Hospital and Clinics, we're located in Tampa, Florida, with community-based outpatient clinics in Hernando, Hillsborough, Pasco, and Polk counties. Haley is one of the 5 polytrauma centers within the VA system of care, and when combined with our 100-bed Michael Bilirakis Spinal Cord Injury Center, it is the largest federal rehabilitation center in the country. In fiscal year 18, we treated over 97,000 unique veterans and active duty patients with almost 12,000 admissions and more than 1.4 million outpatient visits, of which 129,000 of those visits were performed just down the road at the Newport Richey Outpatient Clinic. I firmly believe that to be successful, we need to be an active partner in the communities we serve. And nowhere is that more evident than in our mission to end veteran homelessness. Through VA and our partners' efforts, homelessness among veterans has reduced about 50% nationally from 2011 to 2019. Locally in our catchment area, it has reduced by more than 70% during the same time frame. Guided by the principle of housing first and a goal of finding permanent housing, HUD-VASH vouchers have been a key in providing homes for these veterans. We've accomplished these remarkable results to help meet the need and challenges faced by homeless veterans through our collaboration with our community partners, from local housing authorities to veteran service organizations to faith-based organizations, just to name a few. Haley has partnerships with law enforcement and legal communities throughout our catchment area. Staff provide outreach services in local jails to justice-involved veterans. Individualized services are offered with an effort to assist in discharge planning to prevent homelessness upon release. The VGAO specialists staff veteran treatment courts with an effort to support justice-involved veterans engaged in treatment services. The priority of our Healthcare for Homeless program is to break the cycle of homelessness using a variety of community resources, which include permanent supportive housing programs, transitional housing programs, prevention and diversion programs, rapid rehousing programs, substance use treatment programs, medical and mental health services, employment services, and case management. But most often it comes down to finding housing. At Haley, we have 1,060 HUD-VASH vouchers available for use, and currently 919 veterans are permanently housed using these vouchers. Our staff connect homeless veterans to a variety of services, including the HUD-VASH program. Contract residential services, grant and per diem programs, and adjunctive programs such as supportive services for veterans' families, rapid rehousing, and homeless prevention. The team manages a wide array of homeless veteran outreach programs through street and clinic-based services. I freely admit we haven't eradicated homelessness as it continues to be an issue in our catchment area. But we are a continuous improvement organization, always striving to be better at what we do and find innovative solutions to universal challenges. The greatest challenge we face with housing veterans is the rapid rise in rents throughout our area of operation. We're working with federal, state, and local partners to meet this challenge and find innovative solutions. The James A. Haley Veterans Hospital is committed to providing high-quality care to our veterans that they have earned and deserve. We'll strive to continually improve access and services to meet the needs of all veterans. We are committed to working with our community partners to end homelessness amongst veterans. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and the resources Congress provides to VA to care for our veterans. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I'm prepared to respond to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Battle. Mr. Burgess, you're now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Bilirakis and Congressman Spano. It is truly an honor to be able to present my testimony before this committee today, and welcome to Pasco County. Proud to have you here. FDVA seeks to address ways to provide the assistance Florida veterans have earned and deserved by their service to their nation. As the newly appointed Executive Director for the state of Florida for the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs, I felt the need to look and find ways we as a state could address gaps in veterans services and work together to solve some of the most crucial and time-sensitive issues that face veterans today. I'm joined today by my Deputy Director, United States Marine Corps Major General retired James Hammer Hartzell, who is just behind me to the back and also a Pasco resident, so very proud to have him on our team and have him with me today. And together, and our team at FDVA, we are scattered throughout the state, and we led an initiative kicked off by Governor Ron DeSantis called Forward March. FDVA hosted working groups in this Forward March initiative in key communities across 7 regions of the state of Florida in a 5-month period. Those regions included Tampa, Pensacola, Jacksonville, Lake Worth and West Palm Beach, Ocala, Miami, Cape Canaveral, and Sarasota. Leadership from state, federal, city, and county municipalities, civic groups, church groups, veteran service organizations, charities, and anybody operating within that region that has an ability to impact the veteran community were invited. And I'd say collectively we touched well over 1,000 leaders in the veteran communities throughout the state of Florida in this 5-month process. And this mission began on March 29th of 2019 and continues to this day. It is a combination of knowledge from leadership on the state and local level, as well as the private sector. And these groups and charities across the state, they addressed many important topics, one of which, of course, was what we're here to address today, which is the homelessness crisis amongst our veteran community. Veteran homelessness and community services work groups focused on the challenges, the impacts and gaps, best practices and initiatives, and resources necessary to bring about change to these existing conditions within these meeting structures. The results of these discussions across the state is that there are a host of fragmented veterans services that augment the federal VA benefit system. That patchwork tends to be locally focused, community-oriented, and effective for its regional population, but often work in silos that are separate and distinct and limited in their scope of focus. Because they are local and inward, these groups face issues of adequate funding, lack of proper information dissemination and sharing, lodging and subsistence, and adequate resources for outreach. So they're insular and must rely on benefits of coordination, mutual assistance, and resource sharing, which is one of the big things we gathered from Forward March, is that need for collaboration to help fill the gaps, open up lines of communication and barriers, and everybody's marching to that same beat of the drum in that same direction. That collectivity and community-based effort will help resolve those issues. And so we realized that we at FDVA can really become a true conduit to try to help bridge those gaps and help connect all these different resources and all these great organizations that are doing so much good and help them work together to combine their efforts. As of August of this year, Florida has 5 counties and 3 communities that have declared functional zero for homelessness. Those are Flagler County, Miami-Dade County, Fort Myers and Lee County, Punta Gorda, Charlotte County, Volusia, and Daytona Beach. Homelessness among veterans in Florida, as Mr. Battle mentioned before, has effectively been cut in half by 2011. And a significant cause for this is the rate of for the decrease in the rate of homelessness is because of the national initiatives, such as the HUD-VASH program. So we can't thank you enough for your support and encouragement of those. It's a very telling and significant decrease, but there's still so much more we can do, as Florida clearly has not yet ended or eradicated at a functional zero veteran homelessness. We have about an estimated 2,543 homeless veterans in Florida that we know about. As we all know, some veterans do not want to be identified. They may not want to come out of the woods, which means we have to reach into those wraparound services and provide that support for mental health and other community care, employment is a critical issue. We have to work on transition and employment and helping get veterans connected to their skill trades that they had put into full effect in a masterful way in the military. That's a key way that we can do this. And so the bottom line is we stand ready as an FDVA to assist our local partners, our federal partners, our members of Congress and the legislative level. And we want to be a resource, we want to be a conduit, we want to help connect dots and raise awareness. What we found more than anything is the key is raising awareness to what's available and what's out there. If veterans don't know, then we won't be able to get them connected to those services. So we need to be more proactive as an FDVA, get out of our foxhole and make sure that we're reaching those veterans who served us. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for coming here. Ranking Member, so proud to call you my congressman and my friend. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, and we stand ready to answer any questions that you may have. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Appreciate that very much. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Lambert for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressman Bilirakis, and Congressman Spanos. I represent one agency who works to combat veterans' homelessness, along with other issues related to homelessness in our community. Today, I'll specifically speak to a local level, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have, especially in the questions of jobs as we move forward. The Pasco County Housing Authority is the recipient of federal funds through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We receive VASH vouchers that are specifically for veterans, housing for veterans, and other extremely hard to come by. So in our local area, there is no homes to be had to put a VASH voucher to. The PCHA, in order to address this issue, we recently purchased property to build a 78-unit veterans housing and mental health housing community. While one would think that the progress has not been made in the lack of stream affordable housing in our area, in the case of the PCHA, we tried to get financing to build this new community. However, banks would not lend to us, even though we are probably one of the best agencies to help combat homelessness for families. Even though the VA and HUD approved this project, a project basing VASH vouchers, which virtually guarantees the property would be successful, meaning it would cash flow through the process. We've met resistance at every level. This has been based on the low funding from HUD through the federal budget on our balance sheet. Housing authorities are designed by nature to have a very slim margin. We have been able to cobble together approximately $2 million in funding, and we're seeking a legislative budget request that I'm working with our Representative Mr. Burgess on to get funding to construct this project. We respectfully request that the federal government create regulations to do what you already have done in the housing arena to allow banks to fund our projects, even though we operate on a low margin level, and to provide backing through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is exactly what they are tasked to do, and we have done in the past cases, in order to get local housing stock for veterans and folks with mental illness. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. And I know the ranking member and I were writing notes down, so I'm sure we're going to have some follow-up questions regarding that project. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Raposa for his opening statement.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity to sit before you, and I'm incredibly grateful to Congressman Bilirakis for his leadership in our area. Every community needs a herald, and every community needs an advocate, and there's no greater advocate than Gus Bilirakis for our community. St. Vincent de Paul Cares is carrying out a 400-year tradition that was set forth by our namesake in Paris, France. And our worldwide goal continues to be ending homelessness and obliterating poverty on the planet. And since 2012, St. Vincent de Paul Cares has been the leader and been a leader, but been the leader in many of the areas towards the end of veteran homelessness in West Central County, including the counties of Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Polk. In 2018, we expanded our efforts to include the counties of Citrus, Hernando, Sumter, and Lake, and we are about to announce that in 2019, we're going to be expanding our efforts to Manatee, Sarasota, DeSoto, Charlotte, Hardee, Highlands, Hendry, Lee, and Collier counties, and at this point, I need a helicopter. When we embarked on the mission, the mere concept of ending homelessness for any subpopulation was a dream that many felt unrealistic. To that end, at one point, I was summoned into a local county administrator's office who requested that I stop talking about it publicly because the commissioners of that community thought that I was crazy. I understood where he was coming from because at that time, the number of veteran homeless was at 2,850, both on the street and in shelters. And I'm really pleased to say the number in that same county today is at 149. And we've made significant progress, much thanks to the congressional appropriations over the years. And for that, we're really grateful. The creation and the continuation of the Supportive Services for Veteran Families program under VA has completely transformed homeless service delivery nationwide. The data continues to show that the majority of veterans on the street can be immediately moved into housing and, with wraparound services, thrive. The length of time between being on the street and to housing has declined from nearly 180 days when we began to just under 60 days today. Not quite at the 30 where we would like to be, but that is a substantial progress. In addition, the positive impact that SSVF has had on the client to the clients and the households served, the greatest impact has been on our local communities. The program has proved that a systematic approach to ending homelessness across our country will produce a dramatic decline in the number of homelessness. In the Tampa Bay region alone, we have seen a dramatic decrease. The numbers are stagnant or the numbers are on a slight increase. And this has to do with that system. To that end, during the month of August, Pinellas County has seen the number of homeless families with children seeking shelter in a housing intervention at 0 for 4 days. And while this may seem meager, you have to bear in mind the fact that that number has been up over 200 at times, and we're making great progress. So the rapid access to affordable housing, supportive and stabilization services, community organization and coordination, and strong advocacy for change have proven to be the perfect combination. The greatest obstacle that we have faced as a nation is that availability of affordable housing across the country. And we have to adapt our services to meet those needs. And I have some real specific suggestions that I have put together or have come together in conjunction with my friends at the VA. The first is the need to expand the affordable housing supply. VA's Enhanced Use Lease, EUL program, allows for the development of housing on underutilized or unused VA properties, but there are currently no capital funds associated with this project. Allowing the EUL to offer both capital resources as well as the ability to collaborate with HUD-VASH project-based in one-stop procurement process, we would eliminate the need for the developers to seek out multiple resources and operating assistance. This would help and integrate project-based HUD-VASH and EUL development. And finally, we here in the state of Florida continue to see the state's Affordable Housing Trust Fund being swept by our state legislature. This is a huge problem for us because the resources are there, they were designated for that, and our state legislature continues to move them in a different direction. 2019 was the first time in many years that we saw the governor's office and the Senate on the same page to release a historic portion of that money, but the House did not support it, and we desperately need your help with that. When we get to the point of questions, I can offer some other specific solutions to that, and I also hope that we'll talk about reaching an effective end of homelessness. Functional zero is a definition that was set forth by one group, and it is the effective end of homelessness is much more comprehensive for the community and a better alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Posa, for your words. I'd now like to recognize Mr. Anderson for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Levine, Ranking Member Bilirakis. My name is Brian Anderson. I'm a medically retired Green Beret, social worker, founder and CEO of the Veterans Alternative, and a Master of Social Work candidate at Columbia University with a focus on social enterprise administration. I truly appreciate the time given to speak on a problem I'm really familiar with. I moved to Pasco County in 2012. At the time, Pasco and Hillsborough County ranked in the top 10 for overall homelessness. Hillsborough and Pinellas County even ranked in the top 10 for overall homelessness. All three counties were rated as small cities, counties, and continuum of cares. Real change in that area is not that significant. As the 2018 point-in-time count reveals, Pasco and Pinellas County are leading in several homeless statistics, including veteran homelessness. As valiant an effort as James A. Haley, Bay Pines, the state of Florida, local municipalities, non-government organizations have made in the last 7 years, homelessness remains a major issue amongst our veteran population. Models such as Housing First have emerged as a leading evidence-based approach to ending homelessness, yet we lack the number of beds needed, and unfortunately, we cannot build and fund fast enough to keep up with the demand. This brings to focus how we catalog homelessness, healthcare or societal, and the approach in which we attack the issue. By necessity, our country is shifting the focus of healthcare from acute to preventative. You, our elected officials, have played a major role in this shift, and it is evident in our Veteran Health Administration. For the most part, at least at James A. Haley area of operation, a whole health approach is practiced and is increasing overall health and well-being of the veterans served. But approach to homeless is still acute, and that needs to change. The healthcare shift articulates good healthcare as an exercise in interdependency. Yet our homeless programs focus on reactive solutions and little on preventive practices, often implemented by community wellness programs serving the psychosocial needs in the population. Reactive solutions do little in addressing the root cause of the problem, which is a major topic in our nation's discussion on healthcare practices. Homelessness is not the root cause. Rather, it is a byproduct of several contributing factors, including mental health, medical, and economic hardship. These are being addressed in standard practices of care, especially at the state and federal levels, but there's an element missing at the community level, and it is prudent we address this by allocating more resources to wellness programs addressing the psychosocial needs of our veteran population. These wellness programs are critical in reaching the most isolated individuals who are often reluctant to engage in services through normal means of care, such as the Veterans Health Administration. Community-based wellness programs are a crucial part of the solution to prevent homelessness, suicide, risky behaviors from occurring, yet are often pacified as feel-good services. It is time we start including community-based nonprofits as a necessary part of the overall veteran care and prevention programs. Many of these community-based nonprofits are providing services alternative in nature and include camaraderie as a key component of programming. Numerous studies indicate the loss of fictive kinship and the disconnect between veterans and civilians as a major problem we face. Social isolation is a significant concern among veterans from all generations, including our transitioning veterans population, and is often associated with homelessness, suicide, suicidal ideations, risky behaviors, and the use of drugs and alcohol. Veteran nonprofit organizations providing alternative care often utilize a model that includes peers and treatment in an environment outside the standard medical model, and this phenomenon needs to be researched, resourced, and replicated. As the medical model would dictate, focus on treatments rather than programs has emerged as the legislative test to see what these nonprofits bring to our interdependent practice. An extensive program of what started at the VA committee as the Cover Act has been replicated in the state of Florida. An extensive program evaluation of alternative treatment options for veterans is being implemented right now. 12 of the 15 current participants represent community-based nonprofits. It is premature and under-resourced to hypothesize results on a larger scale as it relates to homelessness. But our current standard of practice in doing so is doing little to address prevention, and these community-based veteran nonprofits providing wellness programs are structured to prevent isolation, which is documented cause and result of homelessness, along with suicidal ideations and risky behaviors. If we can accept societal issues are man-made phenomena, then we have the opportunity to change through our constructed system of human interaction. We can end a systemic problem like veteran homelessness through the very structures we created or place value on, such as legislation, resources, and approaches. So I beg you, for the health and well-being of my fictive brothers and sisters, include wellness programs as a part of prevention in the legislation you present and the resources you allocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, thank you for your service and for your words. Really appreciate your being here. And now I'd like to turn to Ms. White, and I'd like to thank you again. I had a chance to read your testimony. Thank you for your courage to come before and to speak to us today. And hopefully we can learn from your story, both things that worked and other things that can be improved. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for your opening testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm an Army veteran. I am also a mother. I became a single mother when my son was 1 and also found us to face a financially burdened situation. At that point, we had become homeless. We couch surfed for a little while before I knew that the VA had programs to assist us. I started advocating for myself, and that's how I was connected to HUD-VASH. Through that process, I was able to also find community organizations such as St. Vincent de Paul's Supportive Services for Veterans Families and Bully Center's federal employment grant that offers assistance to homeless veterans. St. Vincent de Paul assisted us with finding suitable housing and the other financial aspects of actually moving into that apartment. Once we had suitable housing, HUD-VASH was able to take over housing with housing a voucher and case management. Local nonprofit organizations donated furniture, household goods, and sometimes food. They even provided Christmas presents for my son. Due to having suitable housing, I was able to go back to school utilizing the GI Bill and Vocational Rehabilitation's Chapter 31 educational benefits. I performed my required master's practicum at the James A. Haley VA Medical Center as a social work intern. I graduated with my master's in August of 2018. While attending school and working, I received a voucher to defray childcare costs through Early Learning Coalition, which is a very limited resource in the community that HUD-VASH was able to connect me with. Without childcare assistance, it would have been virtually impossible to succeed. Many single parents remain trapped in the system due to this barrier alone. During this time, in addition to mental and medical health care by the VA, I also worked with the VA's compensated work therapy program. I also worked with the Bully Center's Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program, who assisted me with my job readiness and my resume. I continue to work with Vocational Rehabilitation's Employment Services and Career Sources Veterans Employment Services to try to find a job to utilize my master's degree. Currently, I'm an employment security representative for the Department of Economic Opportunity. All these programs for me started with HUD-VASH. HUD-VASH interlinks with a multitude of resources to assist with homeless veterans and connecting us to the needed resources. One resource was Pasco County's Housing Authority. They enrolled me in the Family Self-Sufficiency and Earned Income Disallowance programs, which allow me to continue to work towards financial security and independence. I am working with these resources to meet my last treatment goal of incoming out of HUD-VASH and no longer being eligible. These programs and resources available to assist homeless veterans are the reason I am where I am today. I'm a single mother with a master's degree working towards becoming a licensed clinical social worker. I am able to support my family and maintain a normal living environment for my son. I would not be successful without the assistance of these programs and organizations that assist with the homeless veterans population. Even with these resources, barriers remain a very big reality for struggling veterans. Transportation is a very major barrier. Public transportation in Pasco County is minimal, rendering it almost impossible to maintain employment and school attendance without a vehicle. The financial burden is overwhelming and impossible for the homeless. I was blessed to have a vehicle, but the fear of repossession was a reality. When my car broke down and I could not afford repairs, I could have easily been derailed. But HUD-VASH was able to connect me to wounded warriors who helped pay for my car repairs. If they hadn't, I would still solely be relying on these programs for financial stability and security rather than phasing them out. Without reliable transportation, veterans also remain trapped in the system. There are very few resources to help obtain and maintain transportation. In Pasco County, there are no shelters or transitional housing opportunities for women and children, and very limited shelter beds for men. Without short-term housing solutions, many never have the opportunity to seek permanent housing and independence. Mental health and medical treatment are a very real option once somebody is stably housed in programs such as HUD-VASH. However, no dental resources have resulted in major medical concerns that derail progress towards independence. I entered into HUD-VASH in 2016, and it's taken me just under 4 years to get where I am today. I am still a veteran receiving services through HUD-VASH, but I aim not to make it to the 5th year. Instead of being a homeless veteran family, we are on the path of becoming homeowners with full-time employment and being completely self-sufficient. The resources my son and I utilize are vital to one another and were possible through various grants and programs that the VA helped me access. I have personally witnessed both sides of the programs, one as a client and recipient of the services, but also as completing my internships at the Tampa VA, I got to see the clinical and administrative side of the programs. It is my goal to put my experiences to good use and help other veterans navigate my path to help them meet their goals as well. None of it would have been possible without the funding Congress provides through federal grants, HUD, and educational benefits. Additional funding is needed for emergency and transitional housing, transportation, and ancillary services that will ultimately save money as more veterans become self-sufficient and productive members of their own communities.
Thank you so much, Ms. White.
Thank you.
Very grateful. So as you can see, we have a really, really good panel here, and we want to get right to questions. And I'd like to recognize myself for 5 minutes to begin the question portion of the hearing. And then the ranking member will have 5 minutes, and we'll probably have more questions after that. Mr. Burgess, thanks for being here. And you mentioned 5 counties in Florida who have effectively ended homelessness for the veteran population in Florida, although there's some, we can discuss the definition, but I nonetheless commend you. Flagler County, Volusia County, Lee County, Miami-Dade County, and Charlotte County. I'd really like for San Diego County to get there as well. What lessons can we learn from these areas to effectively end veteran homelessness in other places, whether it be Tampa or San Diego or elsewhere?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question, and we can learn a lot from their experiences and their successes. What we have found and what we believe, and to piggyback off of Mr. Anderson's statement, is that these community-based organizations are where everything lives and dies. They are the boots on the ground. They are the ones that know the people that are within their own communities and neighborhoods. And so we, as a state and as a federal government, I believe, need to look to them for not just example, but the way I see FDVA playing a role in this is discovering what those areas that you just identified as our functional zeros in Florida, what did they do right? What were their lessons learned? And how can we replicate that statewide? How can we support them as opposed to reinventing a wheel at the next level of government? How can we support our local communities, our local organizations, and provide them the resources they need to take that and have a broader brush, be able to apply that across a wider spectrum, and still have that community-based localization within each respective area that it was to expand to. I believe that same principle applies to suicide prevention among veterans and many, many other crises that we're facing when it comes to our veteran community.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Raposa, I'm going to turn to you. We talked before about the use of the term functional zero and perhaps the need for more holistic view. We have a real issue getting an accurate count of the homeless, not just homeless veterans, but the homeless period. The methodology, the point-in-time count, could be improved. The data is sometimes misleading. For example, the survey doesn't include individuals who live in cars or are couch surfing, which leads me to wonder if there's a better and more accurate way to capture a snapshot of all homeless individuals. Like your comments on this, and specifically the 2018 point-in-time count of 281 homeless veterans in Pinellas County, 186 homeless veterans in Pasco County. Do you think that's accurate? And if not, how can we get a more accurate depiction of the homeless veteran population in the Tampa Bay area?
So I'm going to deliberately choose not to discuss the accuracy of it because there's no two communities in Tampa Bay that count the same way. And I liken the pit count to standing before the Eiffel Tower on the ledge facing east with Notre Dame behind you and taking a picture of the people that are standing there and going back 12 months later on the same day and taking the same photo. It's a snapshot, and it is not an accurate portrayal, and it is not scientific. And the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which mandates the count, does not provide zero direction to local communities on how to determine that. It's really easy to count with your eyes closed, and it's really, really easy to count in areas where you know there are no veterans. We have seen as a community in some areas, and not Pasco, that I'm making reference to, where law enforcement has gone out 48 hours to the areas where they know that homeless have gathered and antagonized them to the point that they have fled and scattered, so that when they've gone back to do the count, there was no one there. And that, to me, is just not right. I think that there needs to be, and I think that the administration, the staff at HUD and VA and the Department of Labor really need to take a hard look to provide some specific structure and some specific guidelines. A more accurate look at it is through the AHAR report, which the AHAR report is a methodology that HUD uses that every community through the HMIS system uploads, and it more tracks the flow of homeless in the system the other 364 days of who's in shelter, who has moved from shelter into permanent housing, who has moved from shelter to the street, who has moved to shelter and died, who has moved from shelter to jail, in all of those transitions. I think that that is a healthier picture for us to look at as a community, and we need to begin to take a look away. There are communities that are afraid to report and afraid to count too well in the PIT count because they're afraid they're going to lose money if the account shows things that are too good. If I may, I'd like to talk about the difference between functional zero and an effective end.
Please do. That would be
Okay.
great. And
So functional zero
we'll
is
be a little bit more liberal than we would in DC with the clock. All right.
All right with that.
Well, it's not easy to explain it in a few seconds. So functional zero is a valid concept, and one of the early adopters and the early leaders in this process, Community Solutions, is a nonprofit. However, as time went on, and the numbers started to show, many of the communities that declared functional zero immediately rebounded with the number of homeless on the street astronomically in the opposite direction. And what we've learned through VA and through HUD and through partnerships with the local communities of cares, the continuums of cares in the local communities, is that a more systematic and a systemic approach needs to be looked. Your funding of the USICH, the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, has been mission critical to this process. And they have released 5 benchmarks that local communities need to be striving for. This is a much more holistic approach. They're harder to obtain, but once obtained, they're easier to manage. 3 of the counties in Florida that were mentioned of having achieved functional zero are struggling to maintain it, hence our expansion south. Because if they did it again today, in all likelihood, they would not achieve it today because the systemic approach was not developed. The communities need to be able to identify all veterans experiencing homelessness almost instantly, instant identification. The clock starts ticking when we say hello, not once you hit shelter, not anywhere else. Once we've said hello and someone from the system has seen you, the clock starts ticking. We need to be able to provide shelter to any veteran that is experiencing homelessness and who is unsheltered. You are sitting in a community with no shelter beds, and our county leadership who are sitting in this room have taken bullets to try to put this in place to a local community that does not want shelter. And they are amazing. I know Kathy Pearson is sitting behind me. Amazing leaders in this, and it is very, very difficult to get the community to embrace that need. The community needs to be able to provide intensive transitional housing, but only in limited instances. And we have used GPD and transitional housing too prolifically, and it's only for 4 targeted populations where it actually works. It's very expensive to put people into transitional housing. And we need to be able to measure the capacity of the community to move veterans into housing quickly. And they put benchmarks behind that. And finally, we need to have the resources in place. The community needs to have the resources in place to plan, to build partnership, to look at a systemic capacity in this so that any home veteran that becomes homeless or at the risk of becoming homeless can do that in the future. The challenge with Functional Zero was that many thought it was a one-time thing that we reached. You grabbed the brass ring, mission accomplished, and we move forward. And that is not what the communities have seen, especially here in Florida and in California. We are two target communities because of our palm trees and our mild winters. And we see about a 23% increase in homelessness in the wintertime. The community has to be able to, it's a more fluid and it's a more organic approach to this than just mere Functional Zero.
Thank you, Mr. Raposa. Really appreciate that. I'd like to turn it over to Ranking Member Bilirakis for his first round of questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And Mr. Raposa, thank you for your exceptional work on behalf of our heroes. And I want to thank your organization as well. Ms. White, I want to start off with Ms. White, if that's okay. Ms. White, first of all, I want to thank you again. You are an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
To all of us, and we appreciate it so very much. Let me ask this quickly. How many people do you know that are a success story like you? How many would you say that were in your position?
I would honestly say not many.
Not many?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Then I'll ask this question. Thinking back, what was the one thing that you wish could be made just a little bit easier for you to reach your goal of self-sufficiency? I know you mentioned that the transportation and childcare were challenges, but what was the biggest hurdle that you faced?
The biggest hurdle would honestly be childcare. Without that, I would have been stuck, one, trying to find a part-time job that I can actually find somebody to take care of my child and afford it at the same time. I'd essentially be working to pay for childcare. I wouldn't have been able to go to school or even have a full-time job.
Okay. Follow-up. Conversely, what was the program or benefit that helped you the most, and what would your recommendation be to Congress on how to expand and invest in this program or benefit?
The program that probably helped me the most would be HUD Bash and the housing voucher. Without that, I would probably still be couch surfing with my son. But something that I think the program needs to expand on is as you can see from my story, there's a lot of different programs that all interlink and work together. Unless somebody specifically tells somebody, I'm very good at advocating for myself. But if somebody was not aware of all these different programs, some of them would have never been introduced or explained to them, so they wouldn't have known how to actually get some of these programs. For instance, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program through housing. I was calling every day, finding out what things that I could do to try to get more self-sufficient for myself and my son. But I would have never been introduced to those programs unless I hadn't actually extended my own hand to do it for myself. So I just think better communication between the actual programs and referrals to one another would help a lot.
Okay, and also for the audience, please, and all veterans, please contact our office, our congressional office, because we can refer you to those programs. Just like Danny said, I can call you Danny, we're friends. Public awareness is so very important. But let me ask you, maybe I missed this. I know that you're an exceptional woman, but how did you know to get in contact with the housing?
It was kind of a nonchalant. I was kind of looking for a job, and I had come across one of the programs online. I didn't know if our housing authority actually had it, so I kind of called and found out.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know we're going to have a couple of rounds. Can I, Mr. Chairman, can I ask one more question before? Okay, right. This is for the entire panel, so we'll start with the director of Haley, my good friend, who's doing a good job, by the way, a very good job. From your point of view at the local level, what is the one message or need that I need to take back to Washington with me that would make your job easier or would reduce homelessness among veterans? And that's for the entire panel.
Well, thank you for the question, Congressman Bilirakis. For me, what I'm seeing from a big picture perspective, it's rapidly rising rents. And how can we adjust HUD vouchers to be able to accommodate for rising rents in different areas? And having affordable housing, having a mechanism, as the gentleman said, he couldn't get a bank to loan money. And this is a project-based voucher project where we provided vouchers to help support the pro forma for that project. And apparently it wasn't enough for them to get a loan. So some way to have these projects where they can be guaranteed, kind of like a VA home loan, if you will. But how can these projects have guaranteed backing where they can get funding to build more affordable housing? Because the biggest problem I'm seeing in Florida overall is people are still moving to Florida. They want to live in the state, and it's driving rents up. There was just an article in the newspaper on August 29th about rapidly rising rents in this area of Florida. So anything we can do to provide help with that.
Very good. Danny?
There we go. Thank you, Ranking Member Bilirakis. I still am going to call you that. I'll call you Gus after the meeting, but
all right,
thank you, Ranking
sounds
Member. You've earned it. I would say that a key takeaway from today's meeting that I would love for you to take back to DC would be the need for enhanced transitional programs for our service members that are getting out of the service. We do a really good job, I believe, in the military of teaching service members to put their uniforms on, but maybe not as good of a job teaching them how to take it off. And so I believe it is absolutely mission critical that we have a more structured, unified approach to that, as opposed to, say, you hear veterans say it all the time, that, just kind of the check the box type approach. And I believe that there is the first line of defense, and not the only defense, of course. It's a wraparound services, as you mentioned, Ranking Member, but we absolutely need to, I believe, do a better job of helping service members take that uniform off and find their new purpose here. Civilian, also our outreach individuals who do excellent work in making sure that we're being more proactive here in the state of Florida, as opposed to, say, reactive where a veteran calls us. We're maybe finding ways that we can reach out to them and see if we can help them get connected to their earned benefits and services, as opposed to maybe years later somebody tapping them on the shoulder and said, you should probably check in to see if you're eligible for some benefits. That's an all too common occurrence, and so maybe we can help bridge that gap that way.
Very good, Captain Burgess.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Lambert, please.
Congressman, I think one of the biggest things, and our county has been very progressive. Kathy Pearson has been excellent for us, and Dan Biles and our commission on moving things forward. I can't say that enough. What a great team, and we were certainly behind the 8 ball. But I will say this, as just as the gentleman who oversees Haley, it's access to capital, quite frankly, to build affordable veterans housing units for families and for folks with single families, folks that are homeless. Just take a look at our project that we're going to build, and we will build that project right down on Massachusetts Avenue. But banks will not lend us money, even though the county has put $1 million behind this project. Danny and I are working with our legislative partners to try to get a $2 million budget request, and we put about $1 million together for it. We have the property. It's a PUD. but it's access to capital. Our balance sheet is so low with HUD because we're not designed to make money. We're designed to exist and to try to provide affordable housing communities for our most at-risk population. But because of that, we cannot get banks to finance us for these types of communities. So even though this project is going to be backed by HUD-VASH and Section 811, I believe, homeless vouchers for folks with mental illness, we still can't get a bank to lend us money unless you go out to developers who, by the way, when you go out to those folks, get ready to add about 25% of the project cost will increase because they're going to make money off this project. They're not in the development business for free. And we need to be able to, and that's a key component to us. We're taking on this project to do it ourselves, but that's a key component to us to ensure that we have affordable housing. So when the rents rise within our market area, we can pretty much stay at or below to continue to make sure that the VASH voucher, in this particular instance, funds the project so it remains a viable project, so it supports itself, so we can make the improvements that we need within the community. And to me, that should be a pretty simple thing to do because HUD has backed loans historically to build housing communities across the country, and they have transitioned out of building public housing and things like that, which I don't think is a bad thing, and those support it. But why can't HUD, I believe that HUD should be able to back these types of housing communities and provide oversight at these housing communities when they back it to ensure that they are viable and to ensure that they are maintained the way that they need to be maintained, and to ensure that we can increase veterans' housing stock. Because if you have housing agencies that you fund all across the country every day, the Tampa Housing Authority, places like that, but if we can't build housing, then we've got problems there, Congressman, and it is access to capital, especially when there's a project like this that will easily cash flow. We shouldn't be having a problem to get this project built.
Thank you very much. We already came up with an idea based on your testimony. So
Thank you, sir.
I'll turn it to Mr. Raposo. What can I take back to Washington with me so that we can make your job easier to help our heroes?
So in the backup to my testimony, there's some great specificity that I obviously can't get to, I couldn't get to in my opening remarks. I'm going to tell you right now that if we could convince the state of Florida to release the Sadowski Trust Fund, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't need to have this conversation. Our local health authorities wouldn't have to grovel to get the money to fulfill the mission which they're funded to do and they're supposed to be doing, and the federal government wouldn't have to come in and save us. We have the set-aside money in Tallahassee that is sitting in an account or being used for purposes other than that which the voters put it in place for. I think that the greatest thing that we have going on right now has to do with our ability to subsidize housing short-term and long-term. And an initiative under the Supportive Services for Veteran Families program that is currently being piloted in 10 COCs, and none of ours are one of them, has to do with shallow subsidies. And it would give the grantee the ability to take a situation like Ms. White that is really, really working hard, working with the Department of Labor's Homeless Veteran Integration Program to get an education, to get better job training, to carry the subsidy that we currently offer them from 6 months to 9 months to up to 2 years. And that would allow greater stabilization in those families. It's currently being piloted in 10 communities across I think a large number of them are in California, either in San Diego, LA, and San Francisco that really do have a market issue there. But our veterans need more time in the program to stabilize their the economic situation of their family. We're oftentimes struggling to get them to stand on their feet in a matter of 9 months to 12 months. I think that if we can expand this, and we know that everything happens as a pilot, but I think that if we can expand this across the country or in areas where high demand and rental issues are, I think that that would be something that we could be taking back. I've already spoken to you about lowering the barrier for HUD-VASH and allowing a little bit more wiggle room of who's able to jump through the eye of that needle. We've begun the process of waivers in some of our communities to make those vouchers available to more people. But I will tell you that the landlord community in the free market system is reluctant to take a voucher of any kind to subsidize it because of the lack of quality case management services that has happened in the past, that needs to be beefed up, because we're not having an issue. St. Vincent de Paul is not having an issue in rehousing people. We have put 683 households from homelessness into housing since October 1 of the current fiscal year. 683, all of which are stable. And it's because of our relationship with the landlords that we're able to do that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson.
Ranking Member Billarakis, Chairman Levine, I think it's pretty great that Danny kind of brought up transition. On the transitional web page, there's actually 5 paragraphs about psychosocial well-being or mental health care, behavioral health care. Inside the manual, there's 3 paragraphs about it. Transition and wellness and psychosocial well-being are not really, they don't really pair. Instead, what we've done is we've taken transition counseling and we've put it on the vet centers. And the vet centers are not designed for transitional counseling. So we've got this problem with wellness, but every single place I go, and I travel a lot, I like to fly. Every single place I go, I meet another organization that's providing community-based wellness programs for veterans in that area, yet we're not a part of the interdependent practice of serving veterans. So it's only through VA grants like the sports grants and physical fitness grants that you become part of that. It's only through legislation passed at the state for alternative treatment options for veterans that you become part of that. We are helping in this mental health, psychosocial area. And I think these nonprofits that are across the United States really need to be a part of this game. They're interwoven into our societies, and they need to have bigger seat at the table.
Very good. Let me add that the COVER Act, Brian, which brings in alternative therapies into the VA, the commission has just completed their work pretty much, and we have some really good recommendations. I asked them if they could give me a hint as to what those recommendations might be, and they said, well, we'll know in about a month, but it was very, very positive. So I look forward to following up with legislation to make sure that those alternative therapies are available to all our veterans who access the VA. All right, Ms. White, please. Again, what message, I know we touched upon this a little bit, but what message do you want to give me and the chairman to go back to Washington and see how we can help you and others like you?
I would honestly love to see some of the barriers. I know they won't be broken down, but I would love to see some of them a little bit just minimized a little, such as the transportation. It's just very hard to actually move up in the world when you have no transportation to do it. Another one would be, I know I've worked with homeless veterans who have no teeth or no front teeth or just a lot of dental work that needs to be done, and it's a huge barrier for employers when they go in for job seeking. So that's definitely something that I would love to see touched on as well.
Very good. Thank you so very much. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Wanted to just very briefly address 2 of the topics discussed and let you know kind of the lay of the land in Washington. On transition assistance, we actually passed in the House earlier this year, H.R. 2326. It's the William Mulder Transition Assistance Bill. It's named a very good friend of my colleague Jody Arrington, Republican from Texas, good friend of his, Bill Mulder. They went to high school together. He served in Iraq, and unfortunately, his friend took his own life. My friend, Mr. Arrington, believes had he had better transition assistance, that may have been prevented. So the bill is designed to really ramp up transition assistance, including a lot of off-base transition resources, grants for perhaps places like Florida or in California, where they're trying to do innovative things and have more collaborative relationships between the community and the veteran service organizations in those jurisdictions. So that bill right now is in the Senate. We've been working with our friends Johnny Isaacson, Senator Isaacson, and Ranking Member John Tester to try to get that language inserted in a package of veterans legislation that we're hopeful will be voted on and will pass the Senate sometime by the end of the year. At least that's what we hope. So knock wood on that. On the financing issue, it's really interesting. I know the Ranking Member and I will talk about this. I think it's probably going to require our colleagues in the Financial Services Committee to get involved, and maybe appropriations as well. But it's one of those where I think we'll definitely take a look and try to figure out what can be done. Mr. Battle, I wanted to turn to you for some questions. During our committees, we have a member day in the Veterans Affairs Committee. In fact, all the committees have that same member day where members that are not on the Veterans Affairs Committee come and they testify about what they'd like to see our committee do. There were a few members of Congress that echoed an issue that I hear in my own district in San Diego, and that really it's that there's a delay in the VA referring veterans to public housing authorities through HUD-VASH. Mr. Battle, can you briefly talk about your intake process for veterans who seek HUD-VASH resources?
Chairman Levin, thank you for the question. Yes, I can. At initial intake, we try to turn that around within 24 hours. Maybe if it's a holiday or weekend, it may be a little longer, but business days, we try to turn that around in 24 hours because a person needs help. And then once that is done, then it goes to the Public Housing Authority to start an orientation process after that. That's what we try to do. Usually in the orientation process where a voucher would be issued, that step can take 2 to 4 weeks depending on where you're at. And then once the voucher's issued, there's a housing search. And that search can vary depending on the ability to find housing. But just say usually 3 to 4 weeks, they would look for a place to live. And then you have the rental application process, which is generally around 3 to 5 days. Then you have the housing inspection, where an inspector has to come and validate that it meets HUD standards for someone to live in it. That typically can take up to a week to get that inspection done. And then signing a lease and to move in is another 3 to 5 days. So when you add all that up, you're in a 9-week time frame, something like that.
Got it. Another issue that we hear a lot is that the VA nationwide is suffering a shortage of support staff, and specifically HUD-VASH case managers. In fact, I think I even heard that today. Would you care to comment on the HUD-VASH program and the case workers themselves?
Sure. At the Haley VA today, we have 5 caseworkers and 1 social work associate assigned to Pasco County. One of those caseworkers is vacant. It has been hired. Selection's been made, and that person's going through the boarding process to fill that position. Overall, across our enterprise, we have around 70 people associated with homelessness. That also includes vocational rehab. It includes Veterans Treatment Court, HUD-VASH, some substance abuse, and other things. Out of the 70 FTE altogether, we have 3 vacancies. 2 of those are caseworkers, and 1 is a VJO that's been approved to be hired.
What hurdles do you face in hiring, and what can we do in Congress to provide the resources to help you in the hiring process?
Well, Thank you for that question. The hurdles we have in hiring, fortunately in Florida, we've been able to hire social workers and mental health professionals that affiliate with homeless programming. The process of going through getting someone onboarded, a social worker by nature, for example, has a clinical background, and so they have to go through a boarding process, and their credentials have to be verified, and that takes some time.
Thank you. Ms. White, I wanted to turn to you and ask you whether your experience lines up with all of that, and specifically, and I want to thank you again for your candor and your courage to come and speak with us all. Not the easiest thing in the world to testify, but you're doing a great job, and you're really helping to inform us as we go back and try to, again, craft good policy. Can you speak to, I guess, the timing, what the HUD-VASH application looked like for you, and kind of walk us through how that process worked?
Yes, it roughly took us about 3 months from the day we actually started intake to actually move in to an appointment. So the timeline is actually pretty much perfect right there.
There you go.
So, but yeah, I mean, same thing. We also had St. Vincent de Paul in that time frame also assisting us with finding housing as well.
And you had mentioned before getting child care, the importance of getting child care. Where did I guess, which program did you take advantage of to be able to get child care?
The Early Learning Coalition.
Okay. And do you happen to remember, and feel free if you care not to share this, but do you happen to remember, roughly how much a month was provided, or how long it took to get the program in place?
I was actually on the waiting list for the ELC voucher for about a year. Wow. And then once I had entered into HUD-VASH, it just so happens they called and said they had a couple vouchers just for veterans, which is very, very rare. So it actually went from a year to you have it. And they actually do it based off of income. So at that time, I was paying, I believe, when I first initially started, about $25 a week for childcare.
Okay. Another question, when we had an advocate for homeless veterans, homeless women veterans specifically, come and testify before us in D.C., she had mentioned that there are some who are afraid to come forward and to try to seek services or support because they don't want for, Child Protective Services or someone else to say what's going on with this child. I guess, how did you overcome that? Were you ever worried about that? Did you have anybody at VA or else otherwise that did anything to assuage your concerns about that?
A little bit. I had my son through the VA, so I kind of knew the social worker at the outpatient clinic over here in Newport Richey.
Got it.
And I kind of briefly talked with her about the homeless situation, what would happen with my son, because that was the last thing I wanted, was him to be taken away. So just talking with her kind of helped me realize that just reaching out for help wasn't going to harm us in any type of way. So that's when I found out that there was HUD-VASH and everything like that. So I was able to actually get in touch with those programs at that point.
So that's really interesting. So if you hadn't have known, if you hadn't have had your child through the VA, you may not have known that social worker. You may have. Mm-hmm. So that really is a real problem. And I think it's important that we're always thinking about what we can do to better educate, folks who are in need, that, we're going to be there to help, and that they're not at risk of losing their child by virtue of needing the support. I want to turn it over to my friend, Mr. Bilirakis, if you've got more questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And I want to start with Mr. Brattle, if that's okay. What role does substance abuse and mental health play in hindering success for the chronically homeless? And which programs should we should be investing in to address this particular issue?
Ranking Member Belarakis, thank you for the question. Substance abuse and mental health issues clearly play a role in the homeless situation. As a result of those issues, veterans may experience incarceration. They may get evicted multiple times from housing that they've been in. Again, employment can be an issue. Transportation can be an issue. So all those things play in against the substance abuse. Now, in our homeless program, we actually have 2 substance abuse staff that work in the homeless program that are not like mental health, they're embedded. We also have some ANRPs embedded in the staff. We're a facility that also has a homeless PAC, primary care, for sake of a better word, homeless primary care clinic that homeless veterans can walk into. And so we look at this as a no wrong door approach, whether it's with us or the community, and we try to funnel these veterans to those services that they need. We do look at it from a housing first perspective. If we want a person to address their health care needs, in this case, if it's substance abuse or mental health, that they don't have a safe place to sleep, the chances of them addressing those issues are very slight. And so we try to approach it from those perspectives. Anything that we can do as a collective, the VA and the community working together. One of the things that we've tried to do recently is have work with more faith-based organizations in this arena. While clergy may not be mental health counselors, a lot of people will go to them. So we want to make sure the clergy know how to direct these veterans to resources where they can get the help they need. And so that's something we've been doing more of the last couple of years in that regard. But from a congressional perspective, I would say making sure that we have the resources to continue providing the support that we currently have is most important.
What about those who are being released from incarceration?
Thank you for asking that question. We try to safety net those veterans because what we believe is that if a veteran is incarcerated or in jail with a potential of long-term incarceration due to a mental health or substance abuse type issue, or maybe a physical issue that manifests a certain way, we would rather have that veteran in treatment where we can take care of them, where then they can reintegrate into society in a productive way, and that we're not using resources of the federal, state, or local government to keep them incarcerated. We're not necessarily helping anybody by having them incarcerated. If we can get them in treatment, that's life-changing, and that's what we need to do.
Do we work? I see my friend Judge Crane in the front row. Do you work with the Veterans Court in all of these counties that you?
Yes, sir, we do. And in fact, at the homeless stand down here in Pasco County, the judge runs court there, and we work with them to help veterans get certain legal issues taken care of. In Hillsborough County, we actually host a court once a year at our hospital, at our primary care annex, and the county court there actually comes to the hospital to do it.
Very good thing. All right, one follow-up to actually the chairman's question with regard to medical professionals, medical providers, in this case specifically doctors. I've heard that doctors want to work for the VA. But it takes so long, the verification process, sometimes a year, whereas they just give up and go back into the private sector. What can we do to fix that issue? I mean, I don't think it needs to take a year to get verification as to what their qualifications are and looking into their background. Can you give me some suggestions on that?
Well, I can give you one in particular. The VA historically has, every time a person comes to work at a particular facility, we've required primary source verification for every one of those, even if they're transferring within the VA. One thing might be if we could do primary source verification within the VA once, and if you're moving around within the VA, you wouldn't have to do that again.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Or even for the federal government, if someone was in the military wanting to come to work for the VA and their stuff had been primary source verified, you know, do we need to do it again?
Well, it makes a lot of sense, sir. Even volunteers, doctors who wanted to volunteer their services, and it takes so darn long for them to do it, and they get frustrated. So they'll go work for a free clinic instead, which is good too. But I like, see, the fact that I want to tell you, all these witnesses are in the field. They're boots on the ground. They're grassroots people. They're in the community talking to veterans. So you're not getting any lawyer answers here today, quote lawyer answers that you would get in Washington, D.C. So I have a proposal for you, Mr. Chair. We can, instead of having our hearings in Washington, D.C., we can have half in San Diego and half in here in Florida. How's that sound? Because we're getting some great answers here today.
If that means I get to see my wife and kids more, I think they'd be okay with that. Well, I wanted to thank the ranking member for his excellent questions, and we'll begin to wind this up. But before that, I wanted to ask each one of you, we can just go in order, what we missed. You know, what questions didn't we ask? What comments do you have to inform our work in Washington? And Mr. Battle, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Chairman Levin. I appreciate the opportunity. For us, combating homelessness is very much about having affordable housing for veterans to be able to take advantage of. I see that overall as a huge issue that's preventing us from getting homelessness not only down to chronic zero, but below that. It also would allow us the opportunity to safety net veterans in a more efficient manner to have that. So anything we can do along those lines would be much appreciated. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention one thing that began at our hospital a few months ago. And actually, it's about when, say, a homeless veteran would pass away. Many times they have no family or no one to claim them. And one of our employees saw a hearse coming to get a veteran to take them to the National Cemetery to be buried, and nobody was going to be with them. They were just going to go up there and be interred. And our employee said, you know, that's not right. We need to do something. So his veteran organization, Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association, they have started a program that's starting to spread across the country. And it's an honor escort where they actually escort that veteran to the National Cemetery and make sure that they have proper honors for their last act. And while that's kind of on the back end of the issue, I think it's still nonetheless important that every veteran, whether if they're homeless, they have value and their life means something, and that people want to honor it. So I think I'd like to leave you with that.
Thank you, Mr. Battle. Thank you so much. Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. It's been an absolute honor to be able to be here today and participate in this worthwhile and engaging discussion with these experts. I have learned more today, than I ever knew before on this topic coming to today. So I think is to just give a plug for the state of Florida as well as this community here. I think it's no coincidence that we're here in Pasco County. And the people here lead the way every day on community services and support, whether it's veteran homelessness or any other type of opportunity to help our neighbors in need. And so Pasco County is a great example of that, but even more so across the state of Florida. Florida is the bellwether state of the nation. We are such a diverse state. We have a little bit of everything here that is out there in the rest of the nation, which makes us a great test site, a great beta test site to pilot programs, to pilot initiatives. We have such an amazing working relationship with Visinate and our partners at Haley and across the state of Florida at the federal VA system. And there's plenty of examples of existing partnerships that we've had a lot of success with. So I would just like to encourage the committee and encourage our friends and partners in DC that, when you are looking to implement a program, the Prevents program is a great example with the suicide prevention. Look to Florida. We will work with you, and we also, I believe, are just a great conglomerate of opportunity for that test and that result that could then be multiplied and set the standard nationally. Thank you.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming, and Congressman Bilirakis, it's always a pleasure. You're a great asset to our community and a great congressman. We appreciate it. And I appreciate your comments on saying we need to get out of Washington and not have attorneys come and testify before Congress, because they don't really represent what's going on within our communities. The people who are volunteering here each and every day, and I'm a volunteer as a chairman for the Housing Authority, see what's going on, see the resources that have worked, and see the resources that you have allocated that have been extremely wasted. And I leave you with this conversation. Housing first. Housing's critical. We have to have access to capital. We have to have housing for our veterans, but every member of our community. We're the greatest nation in the world. We see when people get housing, then we can get them into recovery. With Lakuta River Electric Cooperative, my regular job that I actually get paid for, we've seen an initiative for recovery. Recovery through work, so that folks with a mental illness, and we serve veterans at Vincent House through the Clubhouse model, can get into recovery, and we can partner with transitional employers to get these folks jobs. And many of our veterans that come in have had brushes with law enforcement. That's an issue. So when they go in and they talk to the employer, we know what's going on with them. Then we can transition to the work component to get them back into the workforce, because there's dignity in work. I've not met a veteran, or I've not met someone that's homeless that doesn't want to go to work, that doesn't want to have a full and sustaining life, just like Miss White did for her son. Then I would say the Housing Authority, which I'm very proud of, implemented its self-sufficiency program. No veteran, no person that's homeless wants to be on a lifetime of dependency for the federal government. Family self-sufficiency is absolutely critical in those steps. When we get them in there, and you can get them in and start working through the Family Self-Sufficiency Project and get them a home and get them a permanent roof over their head, you will have basically taken them from homelessness through recovery into the workforce to a permanent roof over their head, and then you will have success. And listening to some group of people that come to Washington to tell you that probably don't have an idea of what we're faced with and challenged with within our community, with the Department of Veterans Affairs, with our local county governments, and with St. Vincent de Paul and Veterans Alternatives, this means everything to the people in these local communities, because we're facing it every day. If I can take you with that, I can tell you housing, recovery, mental health counseling, training. Training is absolutely critical. So at WRAC, we have a training program for linemen. Electric co-ops across the country have made veterans employment a first option for us. So we have apprenticeship programs. We're facing a severe shortage of linemen. They come in, they're allowed to use their VA GI Bill, and then we put them through a 5-year apprenticeship program. When they leave our program and they're employed, they're making a 6-figure salary with overtime usually, which enables them. And yes, there are some challenges. We have veterans service officers that help us with those folks. We know that there's challenges, but we make that a priority with the employment with them. So work and self-sufficiency will lead to permanent housing, stable families, and we can keep them in recovery and into work and be productive citizens in our society. So I thank you for coming today, and I look forward to seeing us do a lot of great things together.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Appreciate that very much. Mr. Raposa.
So, again, I echo the incredible sense of gratitude to be here. It's really easy to focus in on what's broken and what's wrong with us. But I have to tell you that I was just appointed this year by our worldwide organization as one of 15 ambassadors for homelessness and affordable housing development across the planet to work within the Vincentian family and also work within the Catholic Church and the Vatican. In the 2 meetings that we have had, we are the only nation on the planet that has solutions. And we have begun the process to educate the rest of the planet on what is working here in the United States of America. And it's easy to focus in on what's wrong with us, but the fact of the matter is that in the last 15 to 20 years, the homeless services, delivery of services has been revolutionized. And we are well on the way to achieving great success. And it's a matter of fine-tooth combing and getting some stuff in line. The first and foremost thing that you need to take back to Washington has to do with the need for a systemic and a systematic approach to doing this. There are communities across this country that are claiming to be functioning in a system, and they're claiming to be doing a systematic approach to this, but they're not. And the numbers are beginning to prove it, and the data is beginning to prove it. And I think those of us that are should be reinforced, and those of us that are should be given the opportunity to kind of take the lead and fix that in other areas. I have grave concerns about the HUD-VASH program and about the service delivery within the HUD-VASH program. You do not have the housing location services in that program that are required. When you look at the recidivism rate and the success rate of the Supportive Services for Veteran Families program going back to 2012, we are running year after year after year with an 85% or higher success rate. This means that these veterans, once housed and once stably housed, do not return to the homeless system. I think it's time to take a look and try to model the delivery of services under HUD-VASH in accordance with the successes that have been proven through SSVF. This has to do with housing location. You have master's degrees, case management people who are brilliant and excellent in the field, but they're not housing locators. That housing location funded function needs to be introduced into that HUD-VASH system. And also the relationship with the landlords long-term is really, really lacking. We have landlords in our community that will rent to us that will say, I'll do it as long as you're not going to turn the case over to HUD-VASH. And that's a problem. And it is not anything, I don't believe that we're doing anything extraordinary. It's about relationship building. And I liken it to the only healthy triangular relationship that exists on the planet, because triangular relationships are clearly not good in interpersonal relationships, but they are good when it comes to housing veterans. And it's the relationship between us as an agency and the client, the veteran, and it's also a relationship between us and the landlord, and then the lease becomes the relationship between the landlord and that veteran. And we maintain that triangular relationship even after we close the case. And we maintain that relationship so that the landlord knows that if St. Vincent de Paul has his or her hand on that client, we're never letting that client go. And therefore, landlords are willing to rent to us. And this is a huge issue. And I also think that a huge issue within the HUD-VASH program is the caseload ratio to case manager. They cannot effectively manage a chronically placed veteran in housing with their emotional, mental, and psychological needs anything above 25-1. It is just not humanly possible. And our state welfare system can prove that, because the last thing that our state welfare system, I don't believe that we have the issues that you see in other parts of the country where families are afraid to have their children taken away, because our state welfare system, they can't afford another child in shelter. We don't have that worry, and we address that right from the beginning. They tell us, please, 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 please continue to intervene because there is no more capacity in the child welfare system across this country. And I don't know of a state that has extra capacity in child welfare. You know, there's a lot of work to do, but I have to tell you, we're a lot better than we think we are. When you take a look at what's happening in Europe and what's happening in Australia and even what's happening up in Canada and what's happening in Africa and all of these other areas where I now have access to what's happening in those areas, we're really in a good spot.
Thank you, Mr. Raposa. Appreciate that. Mr. Anderson.
Well, I heard a lot of talk about capital. We could always change the tax laws and allow nonprofits to have a share of the market, but that's probably a bigger obstacle to overcome. Prevention. I mean, we talk about it, it's always brought up, but when are we actually applying and allocating resources towards prevention? I think it would help out on the back end quite a bit. No, are we going to catch everybody? That's not the reality. But if we can catch a majority of these guys through prevention, and I'm looking forward to looking up HR 2326 to find out what that entails. But I think that preventive maintenance, being able to have some of these wellness programs, will help us reduce a lot of the social isolation and isolation that our warriors face. University of Southern California did a study. They found, and not one study, they did multiple studies in various areas. And they found 3/4 of our veteran population felt disconnected from the civilian world. That's already isolation in itself. So that's something that we have to combat. We're taking guys from an institution and bringing them into this open world, and they are feeling isolated. And that's what leads to so much that we have that are problems: homelessness, suicide, suicidal ideations, risky behaviors. So at some point, we need to start taking a look at how we can prevent that social isolation that these warriors are going through after they leave military service.
Thank you. Well, hopefully the veterans of Florida's 12th District, and for that matter, California's 49th District, know that they are not disconnected, at least from their congressional offices, that they have a place where they can turn for resources and for fellow veterans who actually work in those offices. So.
On that, sir, just real quick, you guys passed the Cover Act back in 2016. Took about 3 years to pass it, and then it took about 3 years for the committee to start. And but my friend Danny Burgess down here on the end, he put it up and said the state of Florida, because he said, you know what, this is good legislation. We're going to get it going as quick as possible. And it took about 3 years to pass it, but now it's passed, and now it's actually going into formation right now. So when he said that Florida is the perfect test site for some of these programs, we're actually laying the foundation to be the test site.
Very good. And Ms. White, some closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to both represent myself and other veterans like myself. I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing more success stories like mine in the future. And given some of the subjects that were touched on today, I'm hoping that's going to start flowing in soon. So I definitely want to say thank you. I know just from my experience, the programs that I've dealt with, they have phenomenal people. I know a lot of my case managers are actually here today from HUD-VASH, Bully Centers, and just a few other ones like Career Source. So I definitely, even without their individual assistance, looking at my situation as individualized, I wouldn't be where I am. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll have a few closing comments. I know the ranking member will too. Before that, I want to just say thank you. I want to say thank you to everybody in this room for spending a good chunk of your morning with us. I want to thank our law enforcement. Can everybody thank our law enforcement? Thank you very much. I want to thank the amazing staff of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. Can you all raise your hands? Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you, guys, for the work that you do. And we actually live stream this on YouTube. I hope we got some people to watch. If they're watching right now, thank you for watching. But we had the great audiovisual folks come out to live stream this as well. And it's really an honor to get to do this. And I learned a lot today that did not come up in California. And between those two, I think we have a whole bunch of information that we're going to use in the weeks and months ahead. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend for not just for hosting us today, but for all the work that you do and that we continue to do together. I'm truly honored to get to serve with you, Ranking Member Bilirakis.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate you bringing this hearing to Florida. You know, as a matter of fact, we were going to have possibly the gentleman here that represents the St. Vincent de Paul. He was thinking about coming out to California, but he didn't get the approval. So we brought it here to you, sir. And you do a wonderful job in the community. All of you do, and I know you all personally, and I know the veterans know you. More importantly, the veterans know you all personally. And I think we got a lot of we got a lot of suggestions, great suggestions today. I also want to thank the resource fair, the booths, the organizations that came out today. I haven't had a chance to shake their hand, but I'd like to. This is a wonderful community. I know I'm biased, but I think it's #1 in taking care of our veterans in this Tampa Bay area. We just have great people, volunteers, and they give their time to our veterans, and they work together in tandem. And I want to specifically thank our Vietnam veterans who have made things easier for our veterans, our current military personnel, and when they become veterans, they're going to have it a lot easier because of our Vietnam veterans. If you're a Vietnam veteran, raise your hand, please. Thank you. We love you all, believe me, all the veterans, but again, the Vietnam veterans stand out because they're selfless in their service. They were selfless in their service in Vietnam, and they're still serving our community. So thank you. God bless you. And again, Mr. Chairman, think about my proposal, because I'll tell you, this was outstanding, and we had a great one in San Diego as well. So thank you. God bless you. And I also want to tell Ms. White that you're welcome to serve on my advisory council. And you mentioned dental care. We're working on that. Okay? We are working on that, and the chairman knows that I have a bill in committee. So thank you. God bless you. Thanks for the turnout, and we'll continue to fight for our heroes.
Well, with that, we can bring this hearing to a close. Great honor to be with you all. Gus is going to take me to what he says is a really good Greek restaurant right after this, so I'm very optimistic. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. The resources that we've been able to bring for our veterans since the Greatest Generation, I think we've made a lot of positive progress. We're cutting down on the rate of homelessness. One homeless veteran is still one too many, and I'm absolutely committed to getting that number down to effective zero. I hope better than that, functional zero in my district, in my part of the country. Just know, again, I'll say it again, this is one issue where it is in no way, shape, or form a partisan issue. We work across the aisle. We get things done in support and in service of those who've given so much on behalf of our country, that have sacrificed for our freedom. We are truly grateful for your service and for all that you continue to do to be engaged with your fellow veterans. And we will continue to work as hard as we can to get things done. All members are going to have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include additional materials. Again, thank you so much. And without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.